Glass conference rooms can look modern and visually interesting, but they're a difficult space to light because almost everything that normally gives you control is missing. Sure, you get plenty of natural light, but how do you control the levels, create separation, and shape contrast, especially when you need multiple looks in the same space? That abundance of natural light can quickly become the enemy of contrast. In this video, I'll show you how I create a consistent look across multiple interviews in this challenging environment. Let's dive right in. It's hard to complain about having too much natural light, and the reality is I'm not complaining. I would take a room like this anytime over a room with no windows, for example. But it's true that when I first step into a room like this one, where you have two walls full of glass, floor to ceiling, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered before I decide how and if I want to shoot in this particular environment. Because if I just show up here and just shoot, then everything is in the same level. There's going to be no separation. And what do we mean by separation is obviously we can see it on his face where this side is brighter than that side. So if we look at false color, we can see separation on his face where here it's brighter than this side. What I like is the separation of probably 90% of my subject with the rest of the image. And so that's what we call the separation, is those different levels. Fortunately enough for me, on that particular day, the sun is actually on this side. It's actually further back, like towards the corner of that room, pretty high up, and I have a good cloud coverage. So looking at the path, it is going this way, meaning we're gonna have to deal with that sunlight all day. It's not gonna go behind the building. The only thing that made it possible for me to say, yep, we're gonna shoot in this particular room is when we have a pretty decent cloud coverage. So I will not get direct sunlight onto my subject. And you can see out there, like the parking lot, everything is kind of like the same level because that cloud basically is a giant softbox. And so I don't have, I'm not gonna deal with like super, super bright spots. The other thing you can kind of see in this picture is the room does have some blinds, and it's got two different type of blinds. It's got this one, which is kind of like not a full blackout, and then it has a full blackout. So I have options to lowering and raising certain things to block the sunlight if I need to. So with those two factors, I felt like this was an okay space for me to shoot. We want to also think about where we want to place the different levels. That goes into really the exposure side of cinematography. I need to make decisions on how bright do I want those cars back there? How bright do I want those trees back there? How bright do I want these columns, this building? All those things I need to decide where they sit on the dynamic range scale, for example. Are those cars 4, 5, 6 stops above middle gray? Where is that building? All those things I have to kind of decide. That decision process is what's gonna be my blueprint to then be able to expose all those different elements, including my subject, so that I know where I need to add and remove lights in order to achieve that. The first thing we need to do here, once we have the framing done and everything is set, we need to lower all the levels of that room using ND filters so that we can then control the lighting as much as possible. We know that the cars on the parking lot are going to be my brightest spot. So I can use my ND filters and adjust the levels to the point where I'm peaking or close to peaking on those bright elements on the parking lot, and the rest is what it is as far as the background. I can't go out there and say, well, now that I've placed my cars, I want my trees to be at a different intensity. I don't have that option. I can go a little higher and let more of the car clip. I could have done that a little bit, but I felt like this was a good level. Once that's done, we can then focus on our subject, and then looking at false colors or using my light meter, I can then identify where his face is falling on the dynamic range. We know skin tone should be 1.5 step above, and So I will just look at the false color or use my light meter, kind of identify, do I need to remove or add light on the key side to get the key side where I want. And in this particular case, we didn't have to add any more light. Unfortunately, I didn't take any pictures of that particular setup. Like you can see, the chair is set this way. Here's the camera. And so this is for the other setup where the person is looking towards their left with the window as their fill side. But the reality is, we didn't change much between the two setups. The main difference is for the setup where they're looking towards the window is I placed a diffuser here to kind of diffuse and soften that daylight to coming in onto their face. And then we use those blinds to kind of control levels. And I was able to then lower what I needed to lower in order to place his key side 1.5 stops above middle gray. In this case, we can look with the false color. And this is post-production false color. This is the DaVinci plugin. This is not a screen grab of my monitor during the shoot, so I don't know exactly how accurate this is. But you can see that, he's somewhere between that 60, 70 IRE on his key side, which is typically where I like to have my brightest spot on his face. This is Rec 709 that we're looking at. So by just lowering those blinds, adding the diffuser, I was able to then get the levels that I wanted on this key side. The next thing we need to do is then figure out how much contrast do we want on his face, the difference between his key side and his fill side. And we just added a light, and in this case we used the Amaran 360C with a softbox, and we just control the intensity of that light. And looking at our false color or taking reading with our light meter, we adjust the intensity until we feel like that's the right contrast that we have between key and fill. The other thing that you see here is we put kind of like a 3/4 backlight. This is the Amaran Halo 100X. We can see it a little bit here on his shoulder, but here we have a pretty good result. Like that, I'm pretty happy with this shot. I'm happy with the composition. I'm happy with the levels. I'm happy with the separation. So that worked out pretty well. Let's look at the other setup. And this one is a little bit more tricky because now, again, we have to figure out how to deal with this sunlight, bringing all this light. And that's where it would really eliminate any contrast on your subject's face. It's always a little bit difficult to create contrast between those two sides just because there's so much light coming in here. So if we look at the false color, you can see that we have separation between here and here, but we're close because this spot right here is all daylight. And so we were able to control the daylight using those blinds and lowering them in order to make sure that we didn't have too much light coming in. And then for our key side, we're not changing our camera settings. Our camera settings are going to stay exactly the same. We're just going to move that Amaran 360C that we used as the fill side for the other interview. We're now going to use that as our key side. And we're just going to move it down a little bit just so it's less wrapping around, less on the front of his face. We're going to move it to the side a little bit, adjust our intensity so that we get to the levels that we want on his face. I decided to use the 100X as kind of an edge. And that's why I put the modifier on there to kind of keep it pretty harsh light. And I'm not sure, that I'll let you guys decide what you think of it. But this is what we see here. And we can see it on the false color really well as well. It's that pink spot right here. And I could have used the key light to make all this space that pink color. And then it would have been even across his face. But by adding this little edge, it just, I think, create a little bit more texture. I have a little bit more of a separation here again. And so now I have 3 levels. I have my fill, I have my key, and then I have an edge. We're very consistent with the first interview. And so we have good separation here. I'm pretty happy with the levels overall. The combination of controlling the natural light first, then strategically adding artificial light where you need separation will allow you to create multiple interview looks that still feel consistent within the same challenging space. If you found this video useful, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more cinematography tips. And if you're interested in learning more about cinematography, check out my online course, Essential Camera Settings. Thanks for watching, and happy filming.